Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Chapter 4. The Keeper of the Keys boomed. They knocked again. Dudley jerked awake. "Where's the cannon?" he said stupidly. There was a crash behind them, and Uncle Vernon came skidding into the room. He was holding a rifle in his hands. Now they knew what had been in the long, thin package he had brought with them. "Who's there?" he shouted. "I warn you, I'm armed." There was a pause. Then, smash. The door was hit with such force that it swung clean off its hinges and, with a deafening crash, landed flat on the floor. A giant of a man was standing in the doorway. His face was almost completely hidden by a long, shaggy mane of hair and a wild, tangled beard, but you could make out his eyes, glinting like black beetles under all the hair. The giant squeezed his way into the hut, stooping so that his head just brushed the ceiling. He bent down, picked up the door, and fitted it easily back into its frame. The noise of the storm outside dropped a little. He turned to look at them all. "You couldn't make us a cup of tea, could you? It's not been an easy journey." He strode over to the sofa, where Dudley sat, frozen with fear. "Baja, you great lump," said the stranger. Dudley squeaked and ran to hide behind his mother, who was crouching, terrified, behind Uncle Vernon. "And here is Harry," said the giant. Harry looked up into the fierce, wild, and shadowy face and saw that the beetle's eyes were crinkled in a smile. "Last time I saw you, you were only a baby," said the giant. "You look a lot like your dad, but you have got your mom's eyes." Uncle Vernon made a funny rasping noise. "I demand that you leave at once." "Sit," he said. "You are breaking." "Ah, shut up, Dursley, you great prune," said the giant. He reached over the back of the sofa, jerked the gun out of Uncle Vernon's hands, bent it into a knot as easily as if it had been made of rubber, and threw it into a corner of the room. Uncle Vernon made another funny noise, like a mouse being trodden on. "Anyway, Harry," said the giant, turning his back on the Dursleys, "a very happy birthday to you. I have got some stew for you. Here, I might sit on it at some point, but it'll taste fine." From the inside pocket of his black overcoat, he pulled a slightly squashed box. Harry opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a large, sticky chocolate cake with "Happy Birthday, Harry" written on it in green icing. Harry looked up at the giant. He meant to say thank you, but the words got lost on the way to his mouth, and what he said instead was, "Who are you?" The giant chuckled. "True, I haven't introduced myself. Rubeus Hagrid, keeper of the keys and grounds at Hogwarts." He held out an enormous hand and shook Harry's whole arm. "What about that tea then, eh?" he said, rubbing his hands together. "I wouldn't say no to something stronger if you have it." His eyes fell on the empty grate with the shriveled chip bags in it, and he snorted. He bent down over the fireplace. They couldn't see what he was doing, but when he drew back a second later, there was a roaring fire there. It filled the whole damp hut with flickering light, and Harry felt the warmth wash over him as though he'd sunk into a hot bath. The giant sat back down on the sofa, which sagged under his weight, and began taking all sorts of things out of the pockets of his coat: a copper kettle, a squashy package of sausages, a poker, a teapot, several chipped mugs, and a bottle of some umber liquid that he took a swig from before starting to make tea. Soon the hut was full of the sound and smell of sizzling sausage. Nobody said a thing while the giant was working, but as he slid the first 6 fat, juicy, slightly burnt sausages from the poker, Dudley fidgeted a little. Uncle Vernon said sharply, "Don't touch anything he gives you, Dudley." The giant chuckled darkly. "Your great pudding of a son doesn't need fattening anymore, Dursley, don't worry." He passed the sausages to Harry, who was so hungry he had never tasted anything so wonderful, but he still couldn't take his eyes off the giant. Finally, as nobody seemed to be about to explain anything, he said, "I'm sorry, but I still don't know who you are." The giant gulped down tea and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Call me Hagrid," he said, "everyone does. And like I told you, I'm keeper of the keys at Hogwarts. You'll know all about Hogwarts, of course." No," said Harry. Hagrid looked shocked. "Sorry," Harry said quickly. "Sonny," barked Hagrid, turning to stare at the Dursleys, who shrank back into the shadows. "It's them who should be sorry. I knew you weren't getting your letters, but I never thought you wouldn't even know about Hogwarts, for crying out loud. Have you ever wondered where your parents learned everything?" "All what?" asked Harry. "All what?" Hagrid thundered. "Now wait just 1 second." He had leaped to his feet. In his anger, he seemed to fill the whole hut. The Dursleys were cowering against the wall. "Do you mean to tell me that this boy knows nothing about anything?" he growled at the Dursleys. Harry thought this was going a bit far. He had been to school, after all, and his marks weren't bad. "I know some things," he said. "I can, do math and stuff." But Hagrid simply waved his hand and said, "About our world, I mean. Your world. My world. Your parents' world." "What world?" Hagrid looked as if he was about to explode. "Dursley," he boomed. Uncle Vernon, who had gone very pale, whispered something that sounded like mumble-wimble. Hagrid stared wildly at Harry. "But you must know about your mom and dad," he said. "I mean, they are famous." "You're famous." "What?" "My parents weren't famous, were they?" You don't know." Hagrid ran his fingers through his hair, fixing Harry with a bewildered stare. "You don't know what you are," he said finally. Uncle Vernon suddenly found his voice. "Stop," he commanded. "Stop right there, sit. I forbid you to tell the boy anything." A braver man than Vernon Dursley would have quailed under the furious look Hagrid now gave him. When Hagrid spoke, every syllable trembled with rage. "You never told him. Never told him what was in the letter Dumbledore left for him." "I was there. I saw Dumbledore leave it, Dursley. And you have kept it from him all these years." "Kept what from me?" said Harry eagerly. "Stop, and I forbid you," yelled Uncle Vernon in panic. Aunt Petunia gasped in horror. "Ah, go boil your heads, both of you," said Hagrid. "Harry, you're a wizard." There was silence inside the hut. Only the sea and the whistling wind could be heard. "A what?" gasped Harry. "Of course, a wizard," Hagrid said, sitting back down on the sofa, which groaned and sunk even lower, "and a thumping good, I'd say, once you have been trained up a bit. With a mom and dad like yours, what else would you be? And I reckon it's about time you read your letter." Harry stretched out his hand at last to take the yellowish envelope, addressed in emerald green to Mr. H. Potter, the floor, hut on the rock, and the sea. He pulled out the letter and read, Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry Headmaster Albus Dumbledore, Order of Merlin, First Class, Grand Sorcerer, Chief Warlock, Supreme Mugwump, International Confed of Wizards, dear Mr. Potter, we are pleased to inform you that you been accepted at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Please find enclosed a list of all the necessary books and equipment. The term begins on 1st September. We await your owl by no later than 31st July. Yours sincerely, Minerva McGonagall. Deputy Headmistress. Questions exploded inside Harry's head like fireworks, and he couldn't decide which to ask first. After a few minutes, he stammered, "What does it mean, they await my owl?" "Galloping Gorgons, that reminds me," said Hagrid, clapping a hand to his forehead with enough force to knock over a cart horse, and from another pocket inside his overcoat he pulled an owl, a real, live, rather ruffled-looking owl, a long quill, and a roll of parchment. With his tongue between his teeth, he scribbled a note that Harry could read upside down. "Dear Professor Dumbledore, give Harry his letter. I'm taking him to buy his things tomorrow. Weather's horrible. I hope you are well." Hagrid rolled up the note, gave it to the owl, which lamped it in its beak, went to the door, and threw the owl out into the storm. Then he came back and sat down, as though this were as normal as talking on the telephone. Harry realized his mouth was open and closed it quickly. "Where was I?" said Hagrid, but at that moment, Uncle Vernon, still ashen-faced but looking very angry, moved into the firelight. "He's not going," he said. Hagrid grunted. "I'd like to see a fantastic muggle stop him," he said. "A what?" said Harry, interested. "A muggle," said Hagrid, "is what we call non-magical folk like there. And it's your bad luck. You grew up in a family of the biggest muggles I ever laid eyes on. We swore when we took him in, we'd put a stop to that rubbish," said Uncle Vernon. "Swore we'd stamp it out of him." "Wizard indeed." "You knew," said Harry. "Didn't you know I'm a wizard?" "I knew," shrieked Aunt Petunia suddenly. "Knew? Of course, we knew. With my dreadful sister being what she was, how could you not be? Oh, she got a letter just like that and disappeared off to that school and came home every vacation with her pockets full of frog spawn, turning teacups into rats. I was the only one who saw her for what she was, a freak. But for my mother and father, oh no, it was Lily this and Lily that. They were proud of having a witch in the family." She stopped to take a deep breath and then went on ranting. It seemed she had been wanting to say all this for years. Then she met that Potter at school, and they married and had you, and I knew you'd be just the same, just as strange, just as abnormal. And then she went and got herself blown up, and we got landed with you." Harry had gone very white. As soon as he found his voice, he said, "Blown up? You told me they died in a car crash." "Car crash," roared Hagrid, jumping up so angrily that the Dursleys scuttled back to their corner. "How could a car crash kill Lily and James Potter? It's an outrage. A scandal. Harry Potter does not know his own story when every kid in our world knows his name." "But why? What happened?" Harry asked urgently. The anger faded from Hagrid's face. He looked suddenly anxious. "I never expected this," he said in a low, worried voice. "I had no idea when Dumbledore told me there might be trouble getting hold of you, how much you didn't know." "Oh, Harry," I'm not sure if I'm the right person to tell you this, but you can't go to Hogwarts without knowing. He threw a dirty look at the Dursleys. Well, you should know as much as I can tell you. Keep in mind, I can't tell you everything. Some of it is a great mystery. I suppose it starts with a person called, but it's incredible you don't know his name. Everyone in our world knows, he said, sitting down and staring into the fire for a few seconds. Who? Well, I don't like saying the name if I can help it. No one does. Why not? Gulping gargoyles, Harry, people are still scared. Blimey, this is difficult. There was this wizard who messed up. As bad as you could go. Worse. Worse than worse. His name was. Hagrid gulped, but no words came out. Could you write it down? Harry suggested. No, I don't know how to spell it. All right, Voldemort. Hagrid shuddered. Don't make me say it again. Anyway, this wizard, about 20 years ago now, started looking for followers. He got me too. Some were afraid, some just wanted a piece of his power because he was getting himself some power. Dark days, Harry. I had no idea who to trust. I didn't dare make friends with strange wizards or witches, and terrible things happened. He was taking me over. Of course, some stood up to him, and he killed them. Horribly. One of the only safe places left was Hogwarts. Dumbledore was probably the only one you know who was afraid of. Didn't dare try taking the school, not just then anyway. Your parents were the best witches and wizards I'd ever met. Back in the day, they were the head boy and girl at Hogwarts. The mystery, I suppose, is why you know who never tried to recruit them before. He probably knew they were too close to Dumbledore and didn't want anything to do with the dark side. Maybe he thought he could persuade them, or maybe he just wanted them out of the way. All anyone knows is that he turned up in the village where you were all living on Halloween 10 years ago. You were just a year old. He arrived at your house and said, Anne dash dot. Hagrid suddenly pulled out a very dirty, spotted handkerchief and blew his nose with a sound like a foghorn. Sorry, he said. But it's too bad. I knew your parents, and you couldn't have found nicer people anyway. You know who killed me. Then, and here is the real mystery, he tried to kill you as well. I suppose he wanted to do it right, or maybe he just liked killing by then. But he couldn't do it. Never wondered how you got that mark on your forehead? That was no ordinary cut. That's what happens when a powerful, evil curse touches you. It even took care of your parents and home, but it didn't work on you, which is why you are famous, Harry. No one ever lived after he decided to kill me, except you, and he'd killed some of the best witches and wizards of the time, the Mackinos, the Bones, the Privets, and you were only a baby, and you lived. Something very painful was going on in Harry's mind. As Hagrid's story came to a close, he again saw the blinding flash of green light, more clearly than he had ever remembered it before, and he remembered something else for the first time in his life, a high, cold, cruel laugh. Hagrid was watching him sadly. I took you from the ruined house myself, on Dumbledore's orders. I brought you all of this. Load of old tush, said Uncle Vernon. Harry jumped. He had almost forgotten that the Dursleys were there. Uncle Vernon certainly seemed to have gotten back his courage. He was glaring at Hagrid, and his fists were clenched. Now, you listen here, boy, he snarled. I accept there is something strange about you, probably nothing a good beating wouldn't have cured, and as for your parents, well, they were weirdos, no denying it, and the world's better off without them, in my opinion. They asked for everything they could get, getting mixed up with these wizarding types, just what I expected. Always knew they'd come to a sticky end, and as for your parents, but at that moment, Hagrid leaped from the sofa and drew a battered pink umbrella from inside his coat. I'm warning you, Dursley. I'm warning you, one more word, he said, pointing this at Uncle Vernon like a sword. In danger of being speared on the end of an umbrella by a bearded giant, Uncle Vernon's courage failed again. He flattened himself against the wall and fell silent. That's better, said Hagrid, breathing heavily and sitting back down on the sofa, which this time sagged right down to the floor. Meanwhile, Harry still had hundreds of questions. But what happened to Wall Dash? Sorry, I mean you know who. Good question, Harry. Disappeared. Vanished. The same night he tried to kill you. Makes you even more famous. That's the biggest mystery. You see, he was gaining power, so why? Did he leave? Some say he died. Codswallop, in my opinion. I don't know if he had enough humans left in him to die. Some say he is still out there, biding his time, but I don't believe it. People who were on his side came back to ours. Some of them came out of trances. Don't you reckon they could have done it if he was coming back? Most of us believe he is still alive, but has lost his powers. Too weak to carry on. Something about you finished him off, Harry. Something was going on that night that he hadn't counted on. I don't know what it was, no one does, but something about you had him stumped, all right. Hagrid looked at Harry with warmth and respect blazing in his eyes, but Harry, instead of feeling pleased and proud, felt quite sure there had been a horrible mistake. A wizard. Him? How could he possibly be? He'd spent his life being clouted by Dudley and bullied by Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon. If he was a wizard, why hadn't they been turned into warty toads? Every time they'd tried to lock him in his cupboard, if he'd once defeated the greatest sorcerer in the world, how come Dudley had always been able to kick him around like a football? Hagrid, he said quietly, I think you must have made a mistake. I don't think I can be a wizard. To his surprise, Hagrid chuckled. Not a wizard, eh? Have you ever made things happen because you were scared or angry? Harry looked into the fire. Now that he thought about it, every strange thing that had ever made his aunt and uncle angry with him had happened when he, Harry, was upset or angry. Chasing Dudley's gang, he'd managed to grow his hair back after dreading going to school with that ridiculous haircut, and hadn't he gotten his revenge the last time Dudley hit him without even realizing it? Hadn't he set a boa constrictor on him? Harry looked back at Hagrid, smiling, and saw that Hagrid was positively beaming at him. See, said Hagrid. Harry Potter, you are not a wizard, just wait, you'll be famous at Hogwarts. But Uncle Vernon wasn't going to give in without a fight. Haven't I told you he is not going, he hissed. He is going to Stonewall High, and he'll be grateful for it. I read those letters, and he needs all kinds of junk, spell books, wands, and so on. If he wants to go, a great muggle like you won't stop him, growled Hagrid. prevent Lily and James Potter's son from enrolling at Hogwarts. You are mad. His name has been written down since he was born. He's off to the finest school of witchcraft and wizardry in the world. 7 years there, and he won't know himself. He'll be with youngsters of his sort for a change, and he'll be under the greatest headmaster Hogwarts ever had. Albus Dumbledore, I am not paying some crazy old fool to teach him magic tricks, exclaimed Uncle Vernon. But he had finally gone too far. Hagrid seized his umbrella and whirled it over his head. Albus Dumbledore right in front of me, he roared. He raised the swaying umbrella to point at Dudley, a flash of violet light, a firecracker-like sound, a sharp squeal, and the next second, Dudley was dancing on the spot, hands clasped over his fat bottom, howling in pain. When he turned his back on them, Harry saw a curly pig's tail poking through a hole in his trousers. Uncle Vernon roared. Pulling Aunt Petunia and Dudley into the other room, he cast one last terrified look at Hagrid and slammed the door behind them. Hagrid looked down at his umbrella and stroked his beard. I shouldn't lose my temper, he said ruefully, but it didn't work anyway. I meant to turn him into a pig, but I suppose he was so much like a pig anyway that there wasn't much left to do. He cast a sideways look at Harry under his bushy eyebrows. Be grateful if you didn't mention that to anyone at Hogwarts, he said. Strictly speaking, I'm not supposed to do magic. I was allowed to follow you to get letters from you and stuff, which was one of the reasons I was so keen to take on the job. Why aren't you supposed to do magic? Asked Harry. Oh, well, I was at Hogwarts myself, but to tell you the truth, I got expelled in my 3rd year. They shattered my wand and everything. But Dumbledore let me stay on as gamekeeper. Great man, Dumbledore. Why were you expelled? It's getting late, and we have got lots to do tomorrow, said Hagrid loudly. You have to go up to town and get all your books and stuff. He took off his thick black coat and threw it to Harry. You can skip under that, he said. Don't mind if it wriggles a bit, I think I still have a couple of dormice in one of the pockets.